The gleaming lights of downtown Shanghai reflected off the windows of the Jade Dragon Hotel, where 28-year-old Mei Lin stood before a full-length mirror, adjusting the delicate pearl necklace that graced her neck. In just 2 hours, she would be officially engaged to Richard Chen, the CEO of Asia's largest tech company. Everything about this moment should have felt perfect, but there was an undeniable heaviness in her heart that she couldn't shake off. The suite around her buzzed with activity as her mother fussed over the arrangement of her hair, while her best friend Lily carefully steamed her designer dress. The ring on her finger, a flawless 5-carat diamond, caught the light and scattered tiny rainbows across the walls. It was beautiful, just like everything else Richard had given her over their 2-year relationship. "You look like a princess," her mother whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "Your father would have been so proud to see you marrying such a successful man." Mei Lin managed a small smile, but her thoughts drifted to another time, another place, to the small coffee shop where she used to work during college. To the kind eyes of someone who had known her before designer clothes and luxury cars became part of her world. Someone who had loved her when all she had to offer was her dreams and determination. Her phone buzzed with a message from Richard: "The guests are starting to arrive. Can't wait to announce our engagement to everyone." She typed a quick reply, her fingers trembling slightly. Richard was everything a woman could want: successful, handsome, and genuinely kind. Their relationship had been a whirlwind of exotic vacations, charity galas, and business events. He had swept her off her feet, showing her a world she had only dreamed of while growing up in her middle-class family. But as she stood there, memories flooded back of late-night conversations over cheap takeout, of laughter shared while walking in the rain without an umbrella, of simple moments that had somehow felt more real than all the luxury she now enjoyed. She thought of Han, her first love, the aspiring photographer who had encouraged her to pursue her passion for art when everyone else had told her to be practical. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. "Miss Lin?" It was Mrs. Wu, the event coordinator. "The photographers are ready for some pre-engagement photos." Mei Lin nodded, smoothing down her dress. As she walked toward the door, she caught a glimpse of a familiar figure through the window of the hotel's garden below. Her heart stopped. There, adjusting his camera equipment, stood Han. He had finally achieved his dream of becoming a professional photographer, and now fate had brought him here, to document one of the biggest nights of her life. She watched as he tested his lighting, his movements as graceful and focused as she remembered. The last time she had seen him was 3 years ago, right before he left for a photography assignment in Tibet. They had promised to stay in touch, but life had other plans. By the time he returned, she had already met Richard. "May?" Lily's voice brought her back to reality. "Are you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," she replied automatically, but her mind was racing. How could she face him? How could she stand there and smile for his camera while pretending that seeing him didn't stir up feelings she thought she had buried long ago? As she descended to the hotel's grand ballroom, each step felt heavier than the last. The room was filling with Shanghai's elite, business tycoons, politicians, and celebrities. This was her world now, or at least it was supposed to be. But as she scanned the crowd, she couldn't help but feel like an outsider looking in. Richard spotted her and made his way over, his face lighting up with genuine affection. "You look absolutely stunning," he said, kissing her cheek. She could smell his expensive cologne, see the perfect cut of his suit, notice how everyone in the room seemed to gravitate toward him. He was magnetic, powerful, everything she thought she wanted. But when Han's eyes met hers across the room, something electric passed between them. In that brief moment, all the memories they had shared came rushing back: their first meeting at the coffee shop, the way he had taught her to see beauty in ordinary moments through his lens, the dreams they had shared under starlit skies. The weight of the diamond ring on her finger suddenly felt overwhelming. As Richard led her toward the stage where they would make their announcement, Mei Lin's mind raced with questions she had been avoiding for months. Had she chosen this life because it was what she truly wanted, or because it was what everyone expected of her? Was she ready to commit to a future that looked perfect on paper but felt somehow incomplete in her heart? The evening stretched before her like an elaborate dance she had to perform, each step choreographed, each smile measured. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing, one that would force her to confront the truth about love, success, and what really matters in life. The grand ballroom of the Jade Dragon Hotel hummed with anticipation as guests mingled over champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres. Mei Lin stood beside Richard, her practiced smile never wavering as they greeted one important guest after another. But her mind kept drifting to the photographer moving quietly through the crowd, capturing moments with his camera. "And this is Mr. Zhang from the investment board," Richard was saying, his hand warm against the small of her back. Mei Lin bowed politely, exchanging pleasantries while trying to ignore the way Han's presence seemed to fill every corner of the room. She couldn't help but notice how he had changed, and hadn't changed, over the past 3 years. His clothes were more professional now, but he still had that same thoughtful look in his eyes, that same way of seeing beyond the surface of things. A server passed by with a tray of champagne, and Mei Lin gratefully accepted a glass, needing something to steady her nerves. As she raised it to her lips, she caught Han adjusting his camera lens, and for a brief moment, their eyes met again. The champagne suddenly tasted bitter in her mouth as memories flooded back unbidden. She remembered their last night together, 3 years ago. They had sat on the roof of his old apartment building, sharing a box of street food dumplings while he showed her the photos he would present for his Tibet assignment. "This could be my big break," he had said, his eyes shining with excitement. "When I come back, we'll have enough to start our own studio." But he had been gone for 8 months, with only sporadic messages when he could find internet connection in remote mountain villages. During those lonely months, Mei Lin had thrown herself into her work at the art gallery, which was where she first met Richard. He had come to purchase pieces for his company's new headquarters, and had been impressed by her knowledge of contemporary Chinese art. "Mei?" Richard's voice pulled her back to the present. "The chairman of the board would like to meet you." As she turned to greet yet another distinguished guest, she felt the weight of Han's camera lens on her. Was he thinking about their past too? About the dreams they had shared? She remembered how he used to photograph her when she wasn't looking, catching her lost in thought at the coffee shop, or sketching in her notebook at the park. "You're most beautiful when you're just being yourself," he would say. The evening progressed like a perfectly orchestrated symphony, each moment carefully planned. But beneath the surface, Mei Lin felt like she was drowning in a sea of doubt. Richard was announcing their engagement in 30 minutes, and instead of feeling excitement, all she felt was panic. Excusing herself, she made her way to the hotel's garden terrace, needing a moment to breathe. The night air was cool against her skin, carrying the sweet scent of jasmine from the carefully manicured gardens below. The city lights twinkled beyond the hotel grounds, a reminder of the world that existed outside this bubble of luxury. "You still bite your lip when you're nervous," a familiar voice said behind her. "Some things never change." Mei Lin turned to find Han standing there, his camera hanging at his side. Up close, she could see the subtle lines around his eyes, evidence of years spent squinting through a viewfinder. He looked tired but content, like someone who had found their purpose in life. "I didn't know you were back in Shanghai," she said softly, her hands gripping the terrace railing. "I've been back for 6 months," he replied. "I have a small studio now, doing freelance work. When they called me for this event, I didn't know." He trailed off, leaving the words unsaid. "Han, she began, but he shook his head. "You don't have to explain. I saw the magazine articles about you and Richard Chen. You've done well for yourself, Mei Lin. You deserve all of this." His voice was gentle, without a trace of bitterness. But it was his kindness that broke something inside her. "Do I?" she whispered. "Sometimes I look at my life and wonder if I'm living someone else's dream." Han took a step closer, his expression serious. Are you happy, Mei Lin? Really happy? Before she could answer, Lily appeared at the terrace doors. There you are. Richard's looking for you. The announcement is in 10 minutes. Mei Lin straightened her shoulders, slipping her professional mask back into place. But as she turned to go, Han spoke again. You know, I still have that photo of you from the coffee shop, the one where you're looking out the window at the rain, planning your future. That girl knew exactly what she wanted. I wonder if she would recognize herself now. His words followed her back into the ballroom, echoing in her mind as she made her way through the crowd. Richard was waiting by the stage, handsome and confident in his perfectly tailored suit. When he saw her, his face lit up with genuine affection. There you are, darling, he said, taking her hand. Ready to make it official? Mei Lin looked up at him, seeing all the security and stability he represented. He was everything she had convinced herself she needed: successful, reliable, kind. But as the master of ceremonies began introducing them, she couldn't stop thinking about Han's question. Was she happy? Really happy? The crowd's attention turned to the stage as Richard led her up the steps. Camera flashes erupted from all directions, but she could feel one particular lens focused on her, capturing not just her image, but perhaps her true self, the self she had carefully hidden away beneath designer dresses and social obligations. As Richard reached for the microphone, Mei Lin's heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. In just moments, their engagement would be announced to all of Shanghai's elite. Her mother would be overjoyed, her future would be secured, and her life would continue along its carefully plotted course. But standing there under the bright lights, with Han's words still ringing in her ears and Richard's hand warm in hers, Mei Lin realized she was standing at a crossroads. Whatever choice she made in the next few minutes would define not just her future, but who she truly was. The spotlight felt unbearably hot as Richard raised the microphone to his lips. Mei Lin stood beside him, her heart racing as she watched the sea of expectant faces before them. In the front row, her mother dabbed at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, while Lily gave her an encouraging thumbs up. But it was the figure standing quietly in the corner, camera raised, that made her pulse quicken. Distinguished guests, Richard began, his voice confident and warm, I've gathered you all here tonight to share a very special moment. He turned to Mei Lin, his eyes full of genuine love. 2 years ago, I walked into an art gallery and met the most extraordinary woman. As Richard spoke about their courtship, Mei Lin felt as though she were watching the scene from outside herself. She saw the perfect couple they made, the successful CEO and the elegant gallery curator, their life together laid out like a carefully curated exhibition. But somewhere beneath the perfect surface, a voice that sounded remarkably like her younger self was screaming to be heard. She thought about the morning's conversation with her mother while getting ready. Your father worked so hard to give us a better life, her mother had said, adjusting Mei Lin's pearl necklace. He would have been so happy to see you marry someone like Richard. No more struggling, no more uncertainty. Her father had passed away 5 years ago, leaving them with little more than memories and unpaid medical bills. Mei Lin had watched her mother work double shifts at the hospital to keep them afloat, to keep her in art school. The weight of that sacrifice had always hung heavy on her shoulders. And so, Richard's voice cut through her thoughts, I would like to officially announce. Wait, Mei Lin heard herself say, the word escaping before she could stop it. The microphone picked up her voice, sending it echoing through the ballroom. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Richard turned to her, confusion clouding his features. Darling? Is everything all right? Mei Lin's hands were trembling as she took the microphone from him. The spotlight seemed to grow even brighter, and she could feel hundreds of eyes fixed upon her. In the corner, Han had lowered his camera, his expression unreadable. She began, her voice shaking. I need to say something first. The silence in the room was deafening. She could see her mother's face crumpling with concern, could feel Richard's questioning gaze. But somehow, the words began to flow. 2 years ago, Richard walked into my gallery and showed me a world I never thought I could be part of. He's given me everything anyone could want: security, stability, luxury. He's kind and generous, and he deserves someone who loves him completely. She turned to Richard, tears welling in her eyes. But I've realized that person isn't me. The crowd erupted in whispers. Richard's face had gone pale, but there was a flicker of understanding in his eyes, as though he had seen this coming but had been hoping to avoid it. I've spent the last 2 years trying to fit myself into a life that looks perfect from the outside, Mei Lin continued, her voice growing stronger. I've changed the way I dress, the way I speak, even the way I think about art. I thought that's what growing up meant, letting go of old dreams for more practical ones. She slipped the diamond ring from her finger, the weight of it suddenly unbearable. But I've realized that growing up actually means being brave enough to be honest, with others, and with yourself. Richard stepped forward, gently taking the ring from her trembling hand. You never quite looked at me the way you look at your art, he said softly, so only she could hear. Or the way you look at him. Mei Lin's eyes filled with tears at his kindness, even in this moment. She turned back to the crowd, seeing the mixed expressions of shock, disapproval, and, from some of the younger guests, something that looked like admiration. I'm sorry for the embarrassment this may cause, she said, her voice clear despite her tears. But I would rather face a moment of embarrassment than a lifetime of regret. With those words, she stepped down from the stage. The crowd parted before her like water, whispers following in her wake. She could hear her mother calling her name, could feel Lily trying to reach her, but she kept walking, her steps quickening as she neared the ballroom doors. As she passed Han, their eyes met. He hadn't moved, hadn't tried to stop her or encourage her. He simply watched, understanding in his gaze, as though he had always known this moment would come. Mei Lin didn't stop until she reached the hotel's rooftop garden. The night air hit her face, cooling her tears as she gripped the railing. Below, the city stretched out before her, a tapestry of lights and possibilities. She heard the door open behind her but didn't turn around. You always did have a flair for the dramatic, Han's voice came softly. Though I think this tops that time you quit the coffee shop by writing your resignation in latte art. A laugh bubbled up through her tears. You remember that? I remember everything about you, Mei Lin. He came to stand beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. Including how you look when you're finally being true to yourself. She turned to face him, seeing not just the man he had become, but the boy who had first taught her to see beauty in imperfect moments. I don't know what happens next, she admitted. I just gave up everything that made sense on paper. Maybe that's exactly what needed to happen, he replied, reaching into his camera bag. He pulled out a worn photograph, the one he had mentioned earlier, of her in the coffee shop, looking out at the rain. Sometimes we need to let go of the life we plan to make room for the life that's waiting for us. Mei Lin looked at the photograph, at her younger self's dreamy expression. She remembered that day, remembered sketching designs for her own gallery in her notebook, imagining a space where art could be accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy elite. I still want that, she whispered, touching the photograph gently. I still want to create something that's truly mine. Han smiled, and in that smile, she saw not just their past, but a possible future, one that wouldn't be perfect or secure, but would be real and true and entirely her own. In the distance, fireworks began to explode over the city, probably from another celebration. But to Mei Lin, they felt like a sign, a celebration of her own, not of an engagement, but of a return to herself. The morning after the failed engagement party dawned with a gentle rain over Shanghai, matching Mei Lin's contemplative mood as she sat in her small childhood bedroom. She had returned to her mother's apartment the previous night, unable to face going back to the luxury condo she shared with Richard. Her designer dress lay crumpled in the corner, a reminder of the life she had just walked away from. Her phone had been buzzing constantly with messages and missed calls, but she couldn't bring herself to look at them yet. Instead, she sat cross-legged on her old bed, surrounded by the remnants of her younger self, art school sketches pinned to the walls, old photography books, and dreams that had somehow gotten lost along the way. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Mei Lin?" Her mother's voice was tentative. "I've made your favorite congee." When Mei Lin opened the door, she found her mother holding a tray with steaming bowls of congee, just like she used to do when Mei Lin was sick as a child. The familiar smell brought tears to her eyes. "Mom, she began, but her mother shook her head. "Let's eat first," she said, setting the tray down on the small desk. "Everything feels less overwhelming with a warm meal in your stomach." They sat in silence for a few moments, the sound of rain against the windows providing a gentle backdrop. Finally, her mother spoke. "You know, your father and I had an arranged marriage." Mei Lin looked up, surprised. This was something her mother had never shared before. "We didn't love each other at first," her mother continued, stirring her congee thoughtfully. "But we grew to love each other deeply. I thought that's how life worked, you make practical choices, and love grows from stability." She paused, reaching out to touch Mei Lin's hand. "But watching you last night, I realized something. You are not me, and your path doesn't have to be the same as mine." Tears rolled down Mei Lin's cheeks. "I'm sorry for embarrassing you in front of everyone. I know how much you wanted this for me." "What I want is for you to be happy," her mother said firmly. "Really happy, not just secure. Your father used to say that talent without courage is like a bird in a golden cage, beautiful, but unable to fly." A buzz from Mei Lin's phone interrupted the moment. This time, she glanced at the screen. It was Lily. "You should answer it," her mother said, gathering the empty bowls. "Real friends stay with you through the storms." When Mei Lin picked up, Lily's voice was full of concern. "Finally. I've been worried sick about you. Are you okay? Do you need me to bring you anything?" "I'm okay," Mei Lin replied, surprising herself by actually meaning it. How is everyone?" "Well, it's quite the scandal, of course," Lily said. "But you know what? Richard made an announcement this morning to all the guests who stayed at the hotel. He said that while he was disappointed, he respected your courage and asked everyone to do the same." Fresh tears welled up in Mei Lin's eyes at Richard's kindness. She had expected anger, not understanding. "Oh, and there's something else you should know," Lily continued. "Han left you something at the gallery. He said it's important." Mei Lin's heart skipped a beat. After their moment on the rooftop, Han had given her space, understanding that she needed time to sort through the aftermath of her decision. "What did he leave?" "You'll have to come see for yourself," Lily replied, a smile evident in her voice. "But first, you need to check your email. The director from the Contemporary Art Center has been trying to reach you." After hanging up, Mei Lin opened her email and gasped. The director wanted to meet with her about curating their upcoming exhibition of emerging photographers. It was exactly the kind of opportunity she had dreamed of before getting caught up in Richard's world, a chance to support new artists, to help tell their stories. With trembling fingers, she began to get ready. Her designer clothes felt wrong now, so she pulled on a simple black dress from her old wardrobe. As she was about to leave, her mother appeared with a small wooden box. "I've been saving this for the right moment," she said, opening the box to reveal a delicate jade pendant. "It belonged to your grandmother. She was an artist too, you know. She painted fans for the local opera house. Not very prestigious, but it made her happy." Mei Lin touched the pendant gently. "Why didn't you ever tell me about her?" "Because when you were growing up, I was so focused on giving you a better life that I forgot about showing you different ways to live that life." Her mother fastened the pendant around her neck. Go. Find your own way to be happy. The rain had stopped by the time Mei Lin reached the gallery. Walking through the familiar space, she felt both strange and at home. This was where she had first met Richard, but it was also where she had always felt most herself. She found the package from Han on her desk. Inside was a photo album, filled with images she had never seen before. They were all of her, taken over their years together, studying at the coffee shop, sketching in the park, talking passionately about art to customers at the gallery. In each photo, she was completely unself-conscious, completely alive. The final page held a single recent photo, one from last night, the moment she had stepped down from the stage. Despite her tears, there was something luminous about her expression, a kind of freedom that took her breath away. On the back, Han had written, "This is who you really are. The rest is up to you." Mei Lin sank into her chair, the album clutched to her chest. For the first time since last night, she felt not just the weight of what she had given up, but the possibility of what she might create. Her phone buzzed with another message, the Contemporary Art Center director wanting to meet tomorrow. Looking around her office, she began to see it with new eyes. The walls that had felt confining now seemed full of possibility. She pulled out her old sketchbook and began to draw, ideas flowing freely for the first time in years. Her life wouldn't be perfect or secure, but it would be authentically hers. Outside her window, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a rainbow over the wet streets of Shanghai. Mei Lin smiled, touching her grandmother's jade pendant. Sometimes the bravest thing you could do was simply be yourself, and let the rest of the world adjust to that truth. A month had passed since the night of the failed engagement, and autumn had begun to paint Shanghai's trees in shades of gold and crimson. Mei Lin stood in the empty space that would soon become her first independent curatorial project, a pop-up gallery in an old industrial building on the outskirts of the art district. Sunlight streamed through the huge windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. "Are you sure about this space?" Lily asked, surveying the bare concrete walls and exposed pipes. "It needs a lot of work." Mei Lin smiled, running her hand along a rough wall. "That's exactly why I love it. It's real, unpolished, perfect for showcasing emerging artists who haven't had their voices heard yet." The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of changes. After her meeting with the Contemporary Art Center, she had been offered the opportunity to curate not just one exhibition, but an entire series focused on up-and-coming photographers and visual artists. The catch? She had to find her own exhibition space and handle all the logistics herself. Her mother had been surprisingly supportive, even offering to loan her some of her savings. But Mei Lin had declined, determined to build something on her own terms. Instead, she had sold most of her designer clothes and accessories, keeping only her grandmother's jade pendant. The profits, combined with her savings, were just enough to rent this space for 6 months. "The first exhibition opens in 3 weeks, Lily reminded her, checking her phone calendar. "Are you sure you can transform this place by then?" Before Mei Lin could answer, a familiar voice echoed through the empty space. "Need some help?" Han stood in the doorway, camera bag slung over his shoulder, a warm smile on his face. They hadn't seen much of each other since that night on the rooftop, both understanding that Mei Lin needed time to find her footing. But they had exchanged messages, sharing small pieces of their daily lives. "What are you doing here?" Mei Lin asked, trying to ignore the way her heart skipped. "Lily mentioned you found a space," he replied, walking in and looking around with an appreciative eye. "I thought maybe you could use an extra pair of hands. And maybe..." He patted his camera bag, "someone to document the transformation?" Lily looked between them with a knowing smile. "Well, would you look at the time? I have a meeting across town. Call me later, Mei Lin." Before either could protest, she was gone, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. Left alone, Mei Lin and Han stood in comfortable silence, both taking in the space and perhaps the weight of the moment. Finally, Han spoke. "You know what this place reminds me of?" "What?" "That old warehouse where we had our first photography exhibition in college. Remember? We hung the photos with string and clothespins because we couldn't afford proper frames." Mei Lin laughed at the memory. "And we served cheap wine in plastic cups, trying to look sophisticated. But the photos were good," Han said softly. "And the dreams were real." She turned to look at him, really look at him. He had changed in the years they'd been apart, there were new lines around his eyes, a quiet confidence in his bearing. But his gaze still held that same warmth, that ability to see beauty in the unfinished and imperfect. "I have something to show you," she said, pulling out her tablet. "The concept for the first exhibition." She pulled up her sketches and plans, showing him how she envisioned transforming the space. "I want to call it Unvarnished Truth, featuring works that capture authentic moments, real emotions, the kind of beauty that doesn't need polish to shine." Han studied the plans, his expression thoughtful. "You're planning to hang the photos at different heights, breaking the traditional gallery line?" "Yes. I want visitors to have to move through the space differently, to look up and down, to engage with the art in a more physical way." Her voice grew animated as she explained her vision. "And look, this wall here? I want to create a community space where visitors can share their own stories and reactions." "It's brilliant," Han said simply. "It's completely you." The praise meant more coming from him than all the polite compliments she'd received at high-end gallery openings. "Will you?" She hesitated, then pressed on. "Would you consider being one of the featured artists?" Han looked surprised. "Are you sure? Won't people talk?" "Let them," Mei Lin said firmly. "Your work deserves to be seen. And I'm done making decisions based on what other people might think." He was quiet for a moment, then reached into his camera bag. "In that case, I have something for you to consider." He pulled out a portfolio. "I've been working on a series called The Space Between, capturing moments of transition, when people are between who they were and who they're becoming." As Mei Lin flipped through the photos, her breath caught. They were stunning, a ballet dancer in mid-leap, suspended between earth and air, an elderly man teaching his grandchild to write traditional characters, the old and new merging, a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis. And there, in the middle of the collection, was a photo of her from the night of the failed engagement, standing on the rooftop garden, her face turned toward the city lights, hope and fear and possibility all mixed together in her expression. "Han, these are..." She struggled to find the words. "Real," he finished for her. "Like you are now." Their eyes met, and in that moment, the space between them seemed to crackle with possibility. But neither moved to close the distance. They both understood that some things couldn't be rushed, that the best stories took time to unfold. Instead, Han picked up a broom that was leaning against the wall. "So, where do we start?" For the next few hours, they worked side by side, cleaning and planning, sharing ideas and memories. Han took photos documenting the space's transformation, while Mei Lin made notes and sketches. It felt natural, like they were college students again, building something from nothing but dreams and determination. As the afternoon sun began to set, casting long shadows through the windows, Mei Lin stood in the center of the space, surveying their progress. The floors were swept, the walls cleaned, and her vision was already beginning to take shape. More importantly, she felt completely, unshakably right about her decision to start over. "Hungry?" Han asked, wiping dust from his hands. "There's still that little noodle place around the corner, if it's still there." Mei Lin smiled, remembering all the late nights they'd spent there during college, planning their futures over steaming bowls of hand-pulled noodles. "Let's find out." As they locked up the gallery space, Mei Lin touched her grandmother's jade pendant, its smooth surface cool against her skin. Sometimes the best paths forward were the ones that led you back to your truest self. And sometimes, she was learning, love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments, but about finding someone who saw your unvarnished truth and helped you build something real. The night before the exhibition opening, Mei Lin stood alone in her transformed gallery space, hardly believing how different everything looked. The rough industrial space had been transformed into something magical. Track lighting cast warm pools of light on the carefully curated photographs, while strings of paper lanterns created intimate corners for visitors to reflect and connect. Han's series, The Space Between, dominated one wall, the large-format prints drawing viewers into moments of profound transition. Beside them, works from other emerging photographers told stories of change, growth, and authenticity. Every piece had been chosen not for its technical perfection, but for its ability to capture genuine human moments. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. "Just dropped off the traditional sweet dumplings you requested for tomorrow. Don't stay too late, dear. You need your rest." Mei Lin smiled, touching her grandmother's jade pendant. Her mother had become her unexpected champion over the past few weeks, helping with everything from paperwork to food preparations for the opening. It was as if her decision to follow her heart had somehow freed them both to be more honest with each other. Burning the midnight oil? She turned to find Lily in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee from their old favorite shop. "I brought reinforcements." "You're a lifesaver," Mei Lin said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I just want everything to be perfect for tomorrow." Lily walked around the space, taking it all in. "It's amazing, you know. Not just the exhibition, but you. You're glowing these days. Even though I'm wearing second-hand clothes and haven't had a proper manicure in weeks." Mei Lin laughed, looking down at her paint-stained fingers. "Especially because of that," Lily said firmly. "Oh, and speaking of changes." She pulled out her phone and showed Mei Lin a news article. Richard Chen had just announced a new charitable foundation focused on making art education accessible to underprivileged children. "He's a good man," Mei Lin said softly, feeling a mix of guilt and gratitude. "I hope he finds someone who loves him the way he deserves." "He will," Lily assured her. "Just like you found your way back to." She was interrupted by a knock at the gallery door. Han stood there, looking slightly disheveled. "Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to adjust the lighting on the Butterfly Emergent series. The shadows weren't quite right." "At midnight?" Lily raised an eyebrow, then gathered her things with a knowing smile. "Well, I should head home. Some of us need our beauty sleep before the big day." After Lily left, Han and Mei Lin worked in comfortable silence, fine-tuning the lighting. It reminded her of their college days, spending hours getting everything just right for their first shows. But they were different people now, with years of experience and growth between them. "Do you ever wonder," Mei Lin asked suddenly, "what would have happened if you hadn't gone to Tibet?" Han paused in his adjustments. "Sometimes. But then I look at my work from before and after, and I know I needed that journey. Just like maybe you needed your time in a different world to understand what you really wanted." She nodded, understanding. We had to become different people to find our way back to ourselves. And to each other? The question hung in the air between them, full of possibility. Before she could respond, they heard another knock. To their surprise, it was old Wang from the noodle shop around the corner, carrying 2 large containers. "Special delivery," he announced cheerfully. "I saw your lights on and thought you might be hungry. My wife made extra dumplings today." Mei Lin's eyes filled with tears at the kindness. Old Wang and his wife had fed them countless times during their college years, sometimes letting them pay with photographs or drawings when money was tight. They sat on the floor of the gallery, sharing dumplings and memories, while old Wang told them about how the neighborhood had changed over the years. "But some things stay the same," he said wisely, looking between them. "Some connections just need time to grow stronger." After he left, Mei Lin and Han continued working, their conversation flowing easily between exhibition details and personal revelations. Han told her about the monasteries in Tibet, about learning to find beauty in stillness. She shared stories about her time in the high-end art world, about feeling like an actress in someone else's play. As they worked, their hands occasionally brushed, sending little sparks of electricity through her. But neither rushed to define what was growing between them. They had both learned that the most precious things couldn't be forced. Around 3 in the morning, they finally finished. The exhibition space looked exactly as Mei Lin had envisioned it, raw yet refined, honest yet elegant. Tomorrow, it would be filled with people, but right now, in the quiet hours before dawn, it felt like a sacred space. "Dance with me," Han said suddenly, pulling out his phone and playing a soft melody, the same song that had been playing in the coffee shop the first time they met. "Here. Now?" Mei Lin laughed, but took his offered hand. They swayed together in the gentle light of the paper lanterns, surrounded by photographs that told stories of transformation. Her head found its way to his shoulder, fitting there as naturally as it had years ago. "I need to tell you something," Han said softly. "I've been offered a position teaching photography at the Shanghai Art Academy. No more long trips, no more months away in remote places." Mei Lin pulled back slightly to look at him. "But you love travel photography. I couldn't ask you to give that up." "You didn't ask. And I'm not giving it up entirely. I'll still do assignments during breaks. But I've realized something." He gestured to his photographs on the wall. "All these moments of transformation I've captured, they made me understand that sometimes the biggest adventures happen right where you are, when you're brave enough to be still and let yourself feel everything." Mei Lin understood. In walking away from a life of luxury and security, she had found something far more valuable, the courage to be herself, to build something real, to love without fear of losing herself. As the first light of dawn began to peek through the windows, they finally prepared to leave. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, critics to impress, bills to pay, a future to build piece by piece. But standing there in the gallery they had created together, Mei Lin felt nothing but peace. "Ready for tomorrow?" Han asked as they locked up. "Ready for everything," she replied, and meant it. They walked out into the quiet streets of pre-dawn Shanghai, their shoulders touching, their steps in sync. Above them, the sky was turning from black to deep blue, promising a new day, a new beginning, and all the beautiful, imperfect moments yet to come. The evening of the exhibition opening arrived with an unexpected autumn rain, but it didn't deter the crowds. The old industrial building hummed with energy as people filled the transformed space, their conversations creating a warm buzz that mixed with the soft background music. Mei Lin stood near the entrance, wearing a vintage qipao she had found in a second-hand shop and her grandmother's jade pendant, greeting visitors with a quiet confidence she had never felt in her designer clothes. The crowd was different from her previous gallery openings, not just the usual wealthy collectors, but students, local artists, and people from the neighborhood. Old Wang and his wife had set up a small traditional tea ceremony in one corner, offering warmth and wisdom to visitors. The simple authenticity of it all made her heart full. "This is extraordinary," said Professor Zhang, the dean of the Shanghai Art Academy, studying Han's Butterfly Emergence series. "The way he captures these moments of transformation, it's like watching life itself unfold." Mei Lin smiled, remembering the night Han had shown her these photos for the first time. "Every piece in this exhibition is about moments of change," she explained. "The courage it takes to become who you're meant to be." As she moved through the gallery, she overheard snippets of conversations, saw people pointing and discussing, witnessed moments of connection as strangers shared their interpretations of the images. Near the community wall, where visitors could post their own stories of transformation, every available space was filled with handwritten notes and small photographs. Her mother arrived wearing her best dress, proudly introducing herself to everyone as the curator's mother. But what touched Mei Lin most was seeing her stop in front of each photograph, taking time to truly look and understand. When she reached the photo Han had taken of Mei Lin on the rooftop the night of the failed engagement, she stood there for a long time. "Now I understand," her mother said when Mei Lin joined her. "This is who you always were. I just couldn't see it before." She squeezed her daughter's hand. "Your grandmother would be so proud. She always said art should speak to the heart, not just the eyes." The exhibition had been open for about an hour when Lily rushed over, looking excited. "There's someone here you should meet," she said, leading Mei Lin to a group of people near Han's travel photography section. To her surprise, she found Richard Chen among them. He looked different, more relaxed in casual clothes, accompanied by a woman who was animatedly discussing one of the photographs with him. "Mei Lin," he said warmly, extending his hand. "This is remarkable. Truly remarkable." "Richard, she began, but he shook his head. "No apologies needed. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit when we're on the wrong path." He gestured to the woman beside him. "This is Dr. Chen Wei, no relation. She's helping me set up the Art Education Foundation." Dr. Chen smiled warmly, her eyes bright with passion as she spoke about their plans to bring art education to underserved communities. Watching them together, Mei Lin saw something she and Richard had never had, a shared vision, a natural connection that didn't require either of them to change who they were. As the evening progressed, Mei Lin found herself pulled into countless conversations, each one reinforcing that she had made the right choice in creating this space for authentic expression. Young photographers asked her advice, collectors expressed interest in supporting emerging artists, and community members shared their own stories of transformation. She was speaking with a group of art students when she felt a gentle touch on her elbow. It was Han, camera in hand as always, but there was something different about his expression. "Come with me," he said softly. "There's something you need to see." He led her to a section of the gallery she hadn't visited in the last hour. There, mounted on the wall, was a new photograph she hadn't seen before, one he must have hung during the opening. It showed her in the empty gallery space weeks ago, surrounded by dust motes in the sunlight, her face alive with possibility as she gestured, explaining her vision for the space. Beside it was another new photo, from just last night, showing her dancing in the lantern light, her head on his shoulder. And beside that, a series of small photos documenting the gallery's transformation, including shots of her working, laughing, creating her dream piece by piece. "I call this series, Coming Home," Han said quietly. "Because that's what I've watched you do over these past weeks, come home to yourself." Mei Lin felt tears welling up in her eyes as she looked at the photos. Each one captured a moment of her journey, not just from that night of the failed engagement, but from the person she had tried to be to the person she truly was. "When did you take all these?" "I never stopped taking pictures of you," he admitted. "Even during those years apart, I kept seeing moments that made me think of you. But these..." He gestured to the recent photos, "These are my favorites. Because this is the real you, the one I fell in love with in college, the one I never stopped loving." Before she could respond, they were interrupted by enthusiastic applause from the main gallery. Old Wang had begun playing his eru, its haunting melody drawing people together. Couples started dancing, the formal atmosphere of a gallery opening dissolving into something more intimate, more real. Han held out his hand. "Dance with me? This time with everyone watching?" She took his hand without hesitation, and as they swayed to the music, surrounded by art and community and love, Mei Lin felt the last pieces of her journey fall into place. This was what she had been looking for all along, not perfection, but authenticity. Not a fairy tale ending, but a real beginning. Later that night, after the last guests had left and the gallery was quiet again, Mei Lin and Han sat on the floor sharing leftover dumplings from Old Wang, just like they used to do in college. The rain had stopped, and moonlight streamed through the windows, making the space feel magical. "What happens now?" she asked, not just about the exhibition's success or their relationship, but about everything. Hans smiled, taking her hand and running his thumb over her paint-stained fingers. Now, we keep building. Keep creating. Keep being real. He looked around at the gallery, at the photographs telling stories of transformation and truth. And we do it together. Mei Lin leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Outside, the city of Shanghai continued its endless dance of old and new, tradition and progress. But here, in this space she had created, in this love she had rediscovered, she had found something timeless, the courage to be herself, the joy of creating something real, and the knowledge that sometimes the happiest endings come not from following a script, but from having the courage to write your own story. Her grandmother's jade pendant caught the moonlight, seeming to glow with an inner light. In that moment, Mei Lin understood that true love, whether for a person, an art form, or oneself, wasn't about perfection. It was about finding beauty in the unvarnished truth, strength in vulnerability, and home in being exactly who you were meant to be.